I want to just kind of make a case actually today that really networking probably today is really a high potentials actually competency. Like they have to be really good at it. And for me, in my career, I think it's probably been one of the things that helped me the most. So when I joined Kohl's, like Cindy said, when we had I think about 300 or 400 people at the corporate office, and I started off as a college relations manager, I realized that all my peers spent most of their time with everyone in HR. Like that's the majority of their relationships. And for me, it just seemed weird. I was just like, well, I don't really understand this business, and I actually have to go sell this business to other people. And I'm also thinking, like, I'm gonna learn a lot about you guys and what you do just because I'm like beside you. I sit beside you every day. And so it seemed odd to me. But what I realized that people weren't comfortable going to other parts of the business because they thought they had to know something. And I realized that actually being vulnerable and real actually worked a lot better. And then eventually I wasn't so vulnerable and I actually knew a lot more. And so if I went through the years really quickly, when the company said, hey, we need a new head of HR, it wasn't because at 34, I actually really knew what I was doing. Seriously, the company was doing $12 billion, and they said they tapped me. They tapped me, I believe, primarily because I had amazing relationships with the business. They knew who I was, and I knew what they needed, and I always worked really hard to deliver. Now, did that actually win me a lot of friends? In HR, with my business partners inside of HR. To be honest with you, no, it did not. And so I had to do a lot of work, and I share this with people, repairing that once I got the job. But initially, it wasn't fun because they thought basically, you know what, they thought I was spending my time brown nosing. The truth is, I just said every business partner, and I wrote it down on a calendar back then, and I went to the business partners who ran functions every day. I showed up at the CFO's office every day. And if they didn't have time, I'd show back up tomorrow, right? And I figured out, why do you need to talk to me? And so I believe it's a competency. And I think the shift has to be, I need to figure out what you, like we said earlier, what you need, and figure out a way to methodically deliver on that. So I think today the work of our teams, no matter what the job is, people really want to know what you know now, and they truly want to know who you know. And if you're able to actually bring that to bear to a circumstance, to a situation, and to be able to help them. We'll go to the next slide. I mean, I think you guys will all agree, right, that we're in a place where it's knowledge plus ideas create value. You know, we've moved from, we'll go to the next slide, we've moved from an agrarian society where it was really about how to do the work. And then, we'll go to the next slide. And then we move to, what we do in the work, right? And you think about our education system, it's actually driven to dump all this mass information into people so I can tell you what to do. Well, we're now in a place, right, we're in this knowledge age, next slide, where I need to know what kind of knowledge you have, and you need to know what knowledge you need. Why? Because it's the only way that you can deliver that value. What does that value mean in a tangible way? It's that you have the ability, you have the access to information. You know how to find information fast, right? You're able to use that network and information to collaborate on projects, which ultimately helps you to create new ideas And you can also continually improve. How does that happen outside of a network? Internally or externally? So I want to talk to you about the habits of hypos. And this is, this research that I'm going to share with you comes out of,
Define what hypo is.
yeah, high potentials. Everybody knows what high potential is. This research comes out, because I try to look at like, okay, it's one thing to give you my opinion, but now, what does the research say? This research comes out of University of Virginia. Over 300 companies, this organization, his name is Rob Cross, he's been looking at hypos, how they function in the organization, and they've looked at over 300 different organizations over the last 15 years. So, tell you a little bit about hypos. I think this probably will resonate with some of you. One of the things that hypos do is they organize their network. And I think one of the things that's really, how many of you actually, when somebody says, I put my people on a spreadsheet, my network, and I actually categorize them, you think, wait a minute, like, are you serious? Is that how you treat relationships? How many people think about that? Right? I do. When I first heard this, I thought, I do that, and that seems like, I always thought I was dirty for that. Like, seriously, I like, okay, is that like weird that I actually do that? But for me, like, it's something I know is important, and I know that if I don't have a system that I'm looking at, I'm probably not gonna stick with it, and I'm probably not gonna do it well. Like, because everything to me is systems and process, right? And sometimes that gets me in trouble. So they organize it. Now, this number actually shocked me. This is the number, it's called the Dunbar number. This is the number that we know that people are able to build deep connections with. 150 people. That's how much we can handle. Now, this research goes back to years when there were like communities and villages that the average size village was 150 people. And those people actually knew each other, or they knew people who were connected. So they actually did have what somewhat we would say deep connection. That's without Facebook and social media. Now, the interesting fact is it doesn't get any better with social media. Because basically it doesn't, because you know what they ate, doesn't necessarily give you a reason to have a deep connection, right? It just goes, maybe I should try that, right? So, the other thing that they do is they're really good at face-to-face and one-on-one meetings, and they leverage this whole idea of just coffee, and that could be inside the business or outside the business. I think Melody talked about doing the weekend kind of thing with people, but they're really good at face-to-face. They're really good at big talk, small talk, and I think Troy talked about this in the question that I believe Ed asked him, to people looking for real conversations with real people, right? And so there is always, in corporately, right, you still have to be, you have to know what's going on in the world, right? You have to understand current events. If you don't like baseball, you kind of have to know that there was a World Series and there were 7 games and that's how they won and what's the point. And if you don't like that, then you actually just say, I'm gonna read that section actually on, Yahoo in the morning, like for 5 minutes, right? But big talk and small talk are equally important, and the data says that neither one of them are more important than the other. They're both mutually important. And I think what I see corporately, I think people think it's all got to be the big talk. But the truth is, how do I connect to you? Like, I need something. Now, it can't be a long conversation, right? We can't talk about the baseball game, right? Now, I will tell you, when I was, I used to walk into a room, and the team, I walk into executive committee, and like they're talking about like the baseball game. And I'm going, oh gosh, what are we gonna talk about this? Let's get on with it, like let's talk about. And I was so uncomfortable with that conversation. I was like, get to the business, dude, we got things to do. I'm like, let's gotta spin wheels and make deals, let's get it going here. But the data says that that's off, right? It's both of them. Now this number was really crazy, I thought initially, but I believe it's true, and I think if you're honest with yourself, this is probably your own experience internally if you're good at this. People are spending about 8 to 10 hours per week internally networking. Now, I'll talk to you in a bit about how you do that, because the math sounds really big when you go 8 to 10 hours a week, right? We're talking about 150 people, right? In your broad network, and that doesn't necessarily only mean that it's people who are internal in that 150, but they're spending 8 to 10 hours per week internally inside their own organizations. So how do you do that? Because 8 to 10 hours a week sounds like a lot to me. How do you make it really focused, efficient? We all have things to do and lots to do, and we have demands outside of work. So there are 4 things that these groups are doing. And they're number one, they're constantly analyzing their network. They're going, who should be in and who should be out, and we'll talk about like some ideas on that and what people are doing that's really working. And so that obviously that means to this whole edit piece, they're diversifying. And so it's not so much who you put in. Also, again, it's about who you're taking out, but what are your objectives? And we talk a lot about, I think we've talked here a little bit about, adding value to other people. And we'll talk about this, it's really important, but one of the context in this whole idea of diversification, you're really honest about what you need. And why is that important? Because you can't help other people if you don't take care of yourself, right? That's where most people, there are a lot of people who are givers in other contexts, but they have nothing. And eventually they aren't able to add any other value to anyone else because it's all out. So there is a management here. And then the last piece is that they're really highly collaborative. And so their collaboration isn't just, I'm going to serve you, I'm also trying to figure out what I need to know from you, how I serve you, and as I serve you, am I actually extracting the best out of that scenario? And so they are all a little bit selfish. Now, I heard this conversation earlier today about, someone asked about levels and like the people you can talk to at certain levels. The research shows that they're really good at managing upward and lateral. And that number that's working for people is 5 to 10%. Again, now this is 15 to 20 years of data, so this is not recent. If it's below 5%, you're probably naive. Because people say, well, okay, I can't go up, right? And I can't spend too much time because I'm brown nosing. And if it's below 5%, you're probably naive. You don't actually, you don't have the ability to read what's happening politically. Right? People don't really know who you are. You have to be on their radar. So you have to, and I think somebody earlier said, put yourself out there. Did I love the idea of going to the CFO when I was a manager and a director in that company? Absolutely, I hated it, but I knew I had to. I had to figure, and I needed to do the hard work. And one of the things that I've also learned for myself is, you guys get the idea of flow, like when you're in your flow, like everything's happening. The truth about flow is this: between this place of what you used to do and just at the edge of anxiety is when you hit the most flow. That's when everything in your life really starts to work, okay? And so we think that we should stay away from that, right? We try to avoid anxiety, but no, that's like the gift, right? That just at the edge of anxiety, right? From what you used to do, what you always do, and then every time you get to that new place, you get to that edge of anxiety and you feel it. She talked about that dopamine. It feeds you, right? That's your new normal. So every time I did that conversation with the CFO or I went to the CIO and said, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, they're talking to me about doing this job where I be an IT recruiter, and I have no idea what a mainframe even is, okay? And can you give me your trade publication and your space so I can go home, so I can go and read it? And I started circling stuff in there and going, okay, I need to figure this out, all right? Personal development is, go back to that slide really, can you go back one quick? The other side, 10% is outside of that. That's when you aren't able to do your job and people do start to see you negatively. Okay? We'll go to the next slide. So how are they breaking out their groups and who they actually spend time with? They really categorize in 3 places. Personal development, they find networks and start to build relationships with people who can actually help feed their personal development. They also are, and this is where I go, it's maybe a little bit selfish, but the truth is, it's fact of survival. It's a political support. We all need it. And then third, people who can provide personal support. People who you go to when your day sucks, right? People who also hold you accountable and say, do you actually go home, right? Do you actually want to keep that person you're with, right? You need that, and that's how they break up their networks. The last part is that they do a really good job of, like I said earlier in the beginning, they ask for help. They're vulnerable. Vulnerable leaders win. Vulnerable people win. Why? Because it's real, it's authentic. And I might not get it cognitively, but I get it emotionally when you're real. And I go, I'm helping you, and I really believe you need it, and you're going to do something with it. And the last part is that they give help, and that's that whole idea of reciprocity and serving that Cindy talked about. So I just gave you guys here just where I kind of build some of the facts around what I said in case you guys ever want to go back and look at that. Hopefully this was helpful. Cindy, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you guys.